Hello, everybody. Welcome to podcast number 2 on this beautiful Friday. Well, it's Friday afternoon for me. It is certainly not afternoon for our guest. Rob Staton of Seahawks Draft Blog and of the BBC is back on with us for a crossover pod. One of my favorite things that we've been able to start doing was start with the draft, and then we've just continued it because I think we enjoy it, and so do other folks. And Rob, man, it's been a while. How's life? You got a lot of hectic stuff going on.
Yeah, the last few weeks have just been crazy, but I'm doing a lot of traveling. So I'm going to Vancouver on Monday. So I'm going to be a little closer to you, Brian. I'll be over there on the West Coast, just a little further north, but looking forward to that. And I get to watch the first preseason game, not at 3:00 in the morning as a consequence, which is really good.
That is nice. That is nice. What brings you over to Vancouver?
Well, just because we used to live over there, me and my wife, obviously we moved out there when we weren't married, but we've not been out together for, wow, so like 13 years. The last time we went out to Canada together was for the Bengals game in 2011. That was like when Richard Sherman had his coming out party. So it's been a long time since we've been over there. And now we've got kids. We want to bore them to death for a week to show them what it was like when we lived there and go, look, that was our old apartment. And that's where I used to work and stuff like that. And my 7-year-old and my 10-year-old are going to be like, I don't care. Like, take us somewhere fun. So, yeah, we're very much looking forward to doing that.
Well, it's a good time of the year to do it for sure. Yeah, you guys will. I'm sure you'll get out and enjoy the weather and all that good stuff. So, sorry that we won't be able to buy you a beer out here and grab a drink, but next time we'll figure it out. It's been a while. I haven't had a chance to kind of hear your thoughts about news that's been coming out of camp, what you're hearing, what your impressions are. How are you feeling as a Seahawks fan right now?
I'm feeling really good. I mean, I don't know what the wider sort of view is on the fan base. I've not really got a great steer on that, but I'm quite happy. And I've said this on a couple of things this week. This is not disrespect for Pete Carroll, but I'm really pleased that we're in a new era, that we have a new head coach, that we have a new staff, that there seems to be a new attention to detail. I was reading like Curtis, who writes for Seahawks Draft Blog's been out there, and he said and maybe you can vouch for this, Brian, that it's a very different feel to camp. The things that are happening. I'm reading your reports and reports from other people saying that it is a different approach, and I was ready to see something new. That doesn't mean that it's all going to be glorious and that they're going to win a whole bunch of games this year or that they're going to win the Super Bowl within the next 5 years. But I was ready to see something new, to have some new energy and a new identity for the Seahawks. So I'm quite looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing what this roster, I've said it to Jeff on separate streams that I think the one really valuable thing that I've participated in the last sort of 6 months since the draft was when you got us together to do essentially the fantasy draft of the NFC West, because it forced me to look at everybody else's roster and then compare Seattle's roster to everybody else's. And by doing that exercise, I kind of came to the understanding that I think the Seahawks have actually got quite a deep roster. It's just that they've got a lot of good players who need to become great players, or a few of them need to become great players for the Seahawks to become a contender. And I think this staff might be able to get them there. So I think it's all positive. It's intriguing. And I'm looking forward to the new season, probably in a way that I haven't for a long time.
That is a common refrain. I mean, I'm hearing that from people. And the fun thing, Rob, is it's coming from like all different types of factions within Seahawks fandom and Seahawks Twitter. There's the people that I think there's some people that really just were so over the moon about Pete as a person and that. And I think they're probably the slowest to come around, but even those folks I think are starting to see the benefits. And you see this notion. We had Alyssa Charleston on our show on Wednesday, and she was talking about how accountability is a big thing for Mike McDonald, and it's true, and the music's a little quieter and all that kind of stuff, but in some ways I feel like the energy level is not only at least as high in those practices, but it's high in the specific ways I want it to be as a fan, which is about the football. And Alyssa was talking about like there's not as many guys dancing, and she hasn't watched Brady Russell before practice. He dances quite a bit, but I mean that was great. But like what I see now is energy about the competition on the field. Like the defense getting psyched when they stop the offense. The offense, like offensive linemen loving it when one of the offensive linemen shoves a defensive lineman to the ground. There's a lot of energy around that. And like that's less manufactured. That's more like I think conducive to building a team that's going to get tougher, going to get better, and hopefully like outperform their talent instead of like, man, how can we have this team and have this performance? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, I think that's hopefully less likely this year.
I couldn't sit through, let's say, week 8, week 9, a press conference with Pete Carroll being asked, how do you fix the run defense? Or how do you fix this aspect of the defense? And he's saying, well, we're going to make a turn, or we've just got to sort this out. And you get in there and you're thinking, my word, we've been hearing this for sort of 2 or 3 years now. And why aren't these things sorted out in camp? And something that Jeff and I were talking about earlier in the week was that it would feel like every season will begin with a glaring issue that needs to be resolved as the season goes along. And I'm sort of sat here now thinking, I don't actually have those concerns. It's not something that I think, maybe short of the offensive line, but that's a long-standing issue with the Seahawks, which may take more than one off season to rectify. But there's nothing really that makes me think, oh my word, they've not addressed that, or they're going to have to bring somebody in as an immediate fix in the next few weeks, or that I can't imagine Mike McDonald's going to be stood there week 9 talking about an issue that in 12 months' time in week 9 he's still going to be saying they're trying to find an answer towards. And that's the positive thing for me, on top of the fact that I don't think this is a roster with too many holes. I think there's something comforting about that as a fan, when what you're actually looking at is, it's not that you need to fill 6 positions in the next 3 drafts. It's more a case of, well, you've done a lot of the drafting because of the Russell Wilson trade. Can some of these players who we like become, real heroes for the Seahawks? The next generation of greats. That's what you want to see. Is DK Metcalf going to take a step? Is Devin Witherspoon going to take a step? What can Byron Murphy achieve? What can Leonard Williams achieve? You can run off several names. So it was really encouraging that Mike McDonald was answering a question at the press conference about Tariq Woolen and basically just stopped mid-answer and took a moment because he didn't want to go too far in his praise of the guy, and then just said, let's just leave it that we're quite excited. And you could just tell that, to me, an answer where sometimes you don't say anything speaks as much as when you actually do say something. And that, to me, made me quite excited that Tariq Woolen is back to what the promise that he showed as a rookie, as opposed to what he showed last year, which was quite a disappointment. So I think it is positive. I don't want to get too carried away because we've not even had one preseason game yet. But I also think, as a fan, you want a reason to be optimistic. You want to feel like the people in charge of the team have got you on the right trajectory. And I do feel like I'm in that place for the first time in a while. And I hope that other people have this and share this. I have a perspective. I think that this year is probably going to be games they lose that they should win, and there may well be games they win that they should lose. But that's all going to be part of a new team with a new set of coaching staff and a new head coach who's never done it before, a new OC who's never done it before, a new DC who's never done it before. It's not all going to come together immediately, but I think we've got to embrace that and appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I think that's the healthy way to look at it, right? Because even if you get to your most optimistic projection of what this team is, I don't think it stretches into a Super Bowl contender. Like, it doesn't feel like that's the moment we're in. And it feels like this is the year where we get to find out, and the team and the players get to find out, if they've got the foundation to become a Super Bowl team. Because right now, if we didn't know anything else about the Seahawks, the way I see it is, this is a team, as you said, of good players, deep roster of good players. There is not a clear trajectory to say this is a great team, and they are building towards being a great team. And this is the year where we find out if that's really the trajectory they're on. Can they break that gravitational pull and actually get into orbit? And so that's, I think you put it really well. It's probably going to be up and down. And one of the things, Rob, I'm really curious about, you've been doing the press thing for a long time. So you've been able to look at managers in the eye and see and feel how they're reacting. You tell me, do you feel like you learn a lot about coaches, managers, when they face some real adversity, like when the games start going the wrong way, they lose some things, and you kind of see like how these new managers or coaches are going to handle that moment.
Yes, and even this summer, the English soccer season doesn't start until next week. But even this summer, when the games are like in the essentially like the pre-season schedule, I've seen a little bit of how coaches act when they face a bit of adversity, and it is interesting because some of them will they will become a little bit tetchy, or they will start to speak in a slightly different way. I do think you find a lot out. I think it's one of the more fascinating things. I think if you are somebody who attends a lot of press conference, you can't help but analyze how coaches handle press conferences. And it's probably not as interesting for fans as it is for people in the media, but I do find it interesting. And I've been interested to listen to Mike Macdonald. I like the fact that as a journalist, I probably wouldn't like this, but his answers are a bit shorter, sometimes a bit to the point. But I think that was almost like what you needed after Pete Carroll. Like Pete would often go off on a long story about something that happened to him when he was with the Vikings or something like that. And Mike Macdonald's probably not going to do that, but he does seem likable and personable. He's not a Belichick style press conference going on here. He's just not Pete Carroll either. I do like you can tell there's a bit of Harbaugh, maybe not so much Jim rather than John in there. And I think it's all very positive so far from like the perception that he is offering. Obviously, it's incredibly positive that they have an English defensive coordinator. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing a bit more from him as well. And although I will encourage that people need to stop taking the piss out of the English accent. Okay. Like, I don't know why is it so interesting I was on a thing. I mentioned this to Puck the other day. I did a bit on Wiesen talking about the Seahawks the other day, and they left the cue in my ear so I could hear what they were saying backstage, and they didn't know I could hear that. And they were taking the piss out of my accent. So I was like, what is it so funny about? We speak the same language. We all have different. If you have a different accent, if you're in the South and you're in the North of America. So like when you come over here, like we've got a slightly different accent. I know my words are a bit funky sometimes compared to what you guys say, but we all speak English, guys.
No, that's so odd. It's an interesting world that you are living in because you don't say things funky. You say like we say things funky from your perspective. It's all ethnocentrism. But like I just I mean everyone I know loves the English accent, and I got a chance to meet AD and Dirty before practice the other day. God, he's a solid guy, Rob. Like, looks you in the eye, comfortable in his own skin, confident in what he knows. He is really coaching up details with the pass rushers, with the edge rushers, hand placement, steps. I think he's a very sneaky addition that like everyone's like, well, Mike Macdonald's the defense, Ryan Grubb's the offense, and maybe you get to Scott Huff even before you talk about Dirty. But this guy was like a defensive line coach for one of the best defensive lines in football and comes highly recommended. I think like the Seahawks haven't had, I think, really good defensive line coaching since Dan Quinn left. And people might argue Clint Hurt was that. For me, I never saw it. I think this could be a big part of it.
I completely agree. And look, I did not want Dan Quinn as head coach, but that was not because I think Dan Quinn is totally useless. Like this, the evidence of his time in Seattle and for a large section of his time in Dallas was that there are some, he does have some qualities as a coach. And if some of that has rubbed off and Adam Dirty, especially with the defensive line, great. And look, he's got some great weapons to work with here. Obviously, the fact that they brought in Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams, Jaron Reed, Jonathan Hankins, that's a really good group of defensive tackles. Think about 12 months ago, we're wondering, hang on a minute, Jaron Reed's going to have to play every snap here. They don't have to worry about that anymore. Your edge rushers, they've got almost an embarrassment of riches, really, in how many players they can rotate. I'd be interested to know what you think about what you've seen from Daryl Taylor, because I know Curtis at Silk Strap Blog is kind of wondering what's going on there. Like, is he ever going to show anything? And I think having brought him back, I think that John Schneider feels that perhaps the old staff did not get the most out of some of the players that he's drafted. And he wants to give, the likes of Taylor another chance. Marquise Blair has come back. They were seemingly open-minded to Jamal Adams coming back. D. Eskridge has come back. I think he feels as if there are players that he wants to see what this staff can do. So I'd actually be quite interested to know what you've seen, if anything, from Daryl Taylor, because he's someone who has all the tools, but putting it together has been an issue for him.
Yeah, I think, look, Daryl Taylor is earned the reputation among Seahawks fans about being a frustrating player. He flashes potential. He gets, 3 sacks in a game, 2 strip sacks, and then he's gone for 4 weeks. He sets the edge in the run, and then he absolutely just gets mauled and is giving, he's earned that, and he's going to have to earn not having that reputation. But I think it's gotten to the point where fans are overly, they're just done with him. I think, from my perspective, if he's one of the best edge players for them on this roster, I'm fine with him being there. And what I've seen in camp is, I think he is behind Mafe, Chenna, and Derek Hall. I think Derek Hall has moved ahead of him in that rotation, depending on if they're doing left, right. I'm guessing that it's not going to necessarily be that, but I think that it is. But I see Daryl Taylor in pass rush drills, 1v1. He's got the fastest spin move of any of the guys, the most natural spin move. He's got NFL quality pass rush moves and counter moves that I know the coaches see. I think the thing with, I did a show this morning on my 53-man roster current prediction, and he is a question mark still. He has not been good enough to where I'm like, oh man, they've unlocked him. So I haven't seen that. But the other thing that's happening is Nelson Caesar has had a really solid camp and has flashed a number of times. And Josh Oniagu, I always forget his name wrong. He's also flashed and is a very good special teams player as an edge. And so then you start thinking, well, Daryl Taylor makes $3 million. You cut him, you gain $3 million in cap. Are they going to want to? I'm guessing he makes the roster. Currently, that's my guess. But it's still not out of the question that they trade him. Could they trade him before? I think Washington's an interesting team. I think Carolina's an interesting team that really needs edge rushers. Dan Morgan is John Schneider's buddy. Do they work a deal for Shaq Thompson, who's an aging inside linebacker, give them some depth? I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with Daryl Taylor.
Yeah, it's interesting that. And I suppose if he does stay, you can have worse fourth pass rushers.
100%.
And he has got some production. And if you're just rolling him out there for, to be a specialist pass rusher at this point, then that you can think of worse options. I wanted to ask you, actually, as you were talking about Derek Hall, because he is somebody who obviously had a very disappointing rookie season. But have you been encouraged then by what you've seen from him at all? I think you've had a chance to speak to him as well, haven't you? So yeah. What have you seen from him? Because I think going into the draft, I thought I can understand why the Seahawks took him where they took him. I know that that people have been quite critical of the pick based on the physical tools and the style of play that he showed at Auburn. But that was a very unexpectedly poor rookie season. So as this staff, again, it's the first week of camp, isn't it? But have you seen anything that could get a fan like me on the other side of the world some optimism about Derek Hall?
Yeah. There's some people trying to say he's the story of camp. I don't think it's to that extent, but it has been a very positive camp for Derek Hall. He still has that NFL level speed to power, his ability to drive guys back, bull rush people with his straight arm pass rush is very real and legitimate. It's only gotten better. But then he's also really his bend has improved. That was always my critique when I watched him in college. I felt like he was very much a straight line pass rusher, had a kind of a one trick pony. He reminded me a little bit of Bruce Irvin. I'm always going to try to, do this one move and either it works or it doesn't. He told me he spent a lot of time on boxing, working on moves, counter moves over the off season, and it's showing up. I think he might be one of the edge rushers that's most helped by the move to Mike McDonald's system, where there's a lot of twists and stunts. I think he combines really well. In some ways, I would say he's been more impressive than Mafe has been in this camp. And that doesn't mean that that's how it's going to end up, but I basically taken him off my list of this guy could be a bust. I don't think that's really on the table. I think he's going to be a solid contributor this year. I'm not saying he's going to have 9 sacks like Mafe did in his second season, but he's going to contribute this year. I'm pretty confident of it.
And I think that the good thing is that because they've now got some interior rush threats, you actually think there's not necessarily that absolute busting need to have someone who can be a dominant edge rusher week to week. I think if you've got a collection of guys who can maybe be used in multiple ways by Mike McDonald, we know that he's very creative in ways to create pressure, and you've got some good guys who can blitz as well. I think if you've got that interior pressure, it should help these guys, shouldn't it? And Brian, how long has it been? Pretty much throughout the entire Pete Carroll era. I mean, I know that back in the Super Bowl year, they obviously had guys who could play almost as a specialist pass rusher, or the McDonald could come in and do a bit of rushing from the interior, and players would contribute. And Mebane obviously was a very good defensive tackle, but they've not really had a Len Williams, have they? They've never really had a Byron Murphy. And then Jarran Reed, if you compare Jarran Reed's production as a pass rusher in terms of pure sacks, it's as good as Gray Jarrett. So he's probably an underrated player in that regard. He's not going to take over a game, Jarran Reed, and win it for you as an interior pass rusher. But he's not a slouch either. He can play a lot of different downs and distances for you to get pressure and create some production there. So don't you think that, like, for me, that's the most positive thing about the team right now, is that for once, I've craved a great D-line for a while. It's not great. It's too early to say it's great, but it's got the potential for that. And then I just wish that, and I understand it's not going to happen now, but that this time next year we'll be saying the same thing about the offensive line. That they fixed one side of the ball this year, and maybe in 2025 they can fix the other side of the ball. Because there's nothing more that I want to see than the Seahawks just, beating people up in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Not one and then on the other it's crap. It's like, no, let's do it on both sides of the ball, and then we can start to maybe think about a team that can become really good.
I think you've got it. And the way things are set up right now, Rob, the most likely outcome this season is that, at least for the offensive line, is that Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff are able to convince John Schneider that no, the interior offensive line does matter. We need to actually invest more in that. And maybe they luck out. Maybe this Connor Williams thing happens. There's not any smoke right now. It's dissipated since the initial report, but you plug a guy like that in the middle, and with the development that Charles Cross is showing, like Charles Cross looks like he's ready to step up and be a legitimately, I'm not going to say like a elite left tackle, but I will say like a solidly above average starter. It's like Russell Okung level starter. Like, it doesn't need to be amazing, right? I think that the offensive line starts to come together, but right now it does have some question marks. I'm not convinced Laken Tomlinson's going to be great. I'm not convinced Anthony Bradford's going to be great. And I'm definitely not convinced Olu Timmy's going to be great. I don't think they're going to be disasters necessarily, but that offensive line, I don't think there's a case to be made that they're about to like take the step and be like one of the better offensive lines. I don't see that yet.
I just want to see a plan, because I don't have an issue per se with John Schneider coming out and saying in interviews, oh, well, they're overpaid and they're overdrafted. There may well be some truth to that. If all of the players, like Damian Lewis is a good example, if he is just an average guard being paid an elite salary, it proves John Schneider's point. If there's a guard that we could probably go back over the last sort of 4 drafts maybe and say, let's have a look at all of the interior offensive linemen who were drafted in the first 2 rounds. And if 80% of them are no good, then again, it validates John Schneider's opinion. It's okay to have that opinion, but then show us what the plan is. What is the plan? Yeah. You can't just say there's nothing we can do. Throw your hands up in the air and go, the situation's hopeless. There has to be a plan. If that is, okay, we're going to bit by bit, we're going to draft the Christian Haynes, and then Scott Huff's going to turn him in, and Grubb's going to turn him into a great right guard, fine. Then they need to do that. If that's the plan. Then if it's a case of we're going to get a veteran once a year and it's going to cost $3 million or whatever Laken Tomlinson costs, and he's going to do a job for us, that's fine, but he has to deliver. Like, if that's your plan, it has to work. We have to sort of understand. And I think for too long in Seattle, it's been hard to understand what the plan is. When you come out and say BJ Finney was our target all along, and you're looking at that and thinking, well, Jack Conklin and cost as much as him, Finney, and those other 2 guys you've signed, and that doesn't make any sense. Like, let's see a cohesive plan to make this offensive line not awful. And once they've done that, then you can go, I'm really proud of the Seahawks to do that. Because right now, if you haven't got a plan, then maybe you are going to have to spend 20 million on a guard. Maybe you are going to have to take a center in the top 50. Because if the plan is just to go through what tends to be the case, these kind of no-name veterans who have just bounced around the league, journeyman types, and day 3 draft picks, if that ain't working, then you have to try something new. You can't keep making the same mistake.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I want to ask you what's going on over at Seahawks Draft Blog. You guys are always churning out great content. You just mentioned Curtis has been out there talking. What's been out there? Anything that people should be aware of that's coming up?
Well, just for the last, apologies for the last few months. Obviously, during the summer, there's not a lot of draft stuff going on, and there's not a lot of NFL stuff going on. And I probably did indulge the European Championship soccer a little too much for a month, culminating in going into the final. But we're back on it now, so we've done a 3,000-word write-up on the quarterback class for 2025. The spoiler alert is that if you are hoping that there is a clear and obvious 2 or 3 guys in the next draft to pine or root for the Seahawks to draft, that's probably not going to be the case. Now, there's a lot of names, and the college football season hasn't kicked off yet, and things do change. I mean, like every year, there's a player who elevates himself into a range. Like Jaden Daniels is a good example of that. No one was saying he's going to be the 2nd overall pick this year, and yet that's what he's ended up being. So things can change, but right now it's hard to look at the list without looking at the cons of every player and sort of almost lingering a little bit too much on those rather than the pros. So that's up there. We're back on the streaming. We're doing a fair bit of that. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit harder when I'm just about to go on vacation for 2 weeks, but I will be doing some writing on the preseason games and stuff like that. And check out Puck Sports as well, which I do a weekly hit with Puck on that. So lots going on. But I'm just ready for week 1. As soon as the Euros finished, I was like, give me some Seahawks football. Like I wanted it like the next day. I need something to occupy my brain. There's like the Olympics is doing a good job of that right now. But that will be done soon. I want some football. I want some Seahawks football. So let's get on with week 1.
I hear you. I hear you on that. And what'll be fun this season if you can figure it out the right way to do it. I'll probably be paying closer attention to college football than I have for the past years because I have time to. And it'd be great to get your kind of viewer's guide to which games of the week, who to watch, who you're watching, because this is going to be a pretty big draft next year. Obviously, we're not going to get too into that now, but COVID years are over. It's supposed to be a pretty deep draft, and Seahawks have quite a few picks in this draft. So would love to make sure we stay up to date with all the latest and greatest on the Seahawks Draft Blog.
Yeah. We won't. I mean, obviously the draft. Whenever I start to draft, I tend to ramble on, so I won't go into it now. But what I will say is, it's looking like a slightly strange draft class. Like there's not an obvious number 1 overall pick next year. There's like a few guys who are not quarterbacks who could end up being the number 1 overall pick. So it's going to be one of those years where there's not a Caleb Williams or a Trevor Lawrence who's going to be number 1 overall. And then there's kind of like 2 or 3 guys at every position who could be a first rounder, which is kind of hard to predict what is the best sort of long-term view on what the Seahawks should do in 2025. It does feel to me like it could end up being, I'm already rambling on about it, is that maybe that first round pick, it could end up being like a best player available draft because there's not like, okay, like I'd love to sit here and say, oh, there's an offensive lineman that they should be all over. If you're going to say that there's linebackers, there's cornerbacks, there are some offensive tackles in this draft. There are some receivers. There's pretty much there is a deep quarterback class. I'm not seeing like an obvious first top 10, top 15 type player right now. So it's going to be an intriguing draft, and certainly one that I think week to week, there's going to be a lot of different opinions on how this draft's shaping up.
Well, looking forward to it. Before I let you go, as you know, I've started covering the Seahawks a little more closely, and one of our YouTube members had this great question. He said, maybe Rob can share some of the top tips for being on the sports beat, things he wished he knew when he was just getting started.
Oh, my word. Yeah, we'd have to do another hour on this. Like, there are a whole bunch of things like from start. I remember when I started out, I hated the way that I interviewed, and then like now I would say, because I hate it so much, I really focused on that. And now I really like the way that I do the interviews. As a presenter, like finding your voice is really difficult. I think it's something you have to work through. I mean, look, I think you've just got to think about your audience all the time. Like, what do they want to hear from you? What do they want to hear from the people you're speaking to? Always put them at the forefront of things. And I think if you do that, you can't go wrong generally. But you also can't be a slave to the opinion of the moment, like the hot thing. Like you've got to do yourself justice. Otherwise, you will just end up being a bit of a sheep. So, I mean, we could talk about this for like the things that I've got wrong in my career and wish I could go back and do again. We could be here all night talking about that. But listen, it's a great job. And I'd also, do you know what the one thing I would say, Brian, is just enjoy the heck out of this. Like, it's just, there's nothing better than sort of getting up every day and thinking, oh, you know, I get to talk about sport. Like that's like the thing. And that's the thing I'll never take for granted. It is the perfect way to live your life if you're a crazy obsessed sports fan. So I just enjoy every second and try not to make some of the mistakes I made 10 years ago.
Well, we'll have to connect about those. Those sound like a fun story, if nothing else. One more thing before I let you go. I just want to thank Ken Bazell, a new YouTube member. Man, we are adding and adding to the family. It's great to see, getting closer to where we got enough folks that I will start covering road games. So every new YouTube member, every new Patreon member at patreon.com/hawkblogger gets a little closer. So join the family. Come on over. Ken, welcome to the crew. Rob, man, it's so fun to talk. We could definitely talk for hours. You and I both know that, but I also want to give you some time. You got a lot going on. So have a wonderful trip out here. We will wave to you from, across the border. And then, when you get back, let's do this again, man.
Yeah, I'll wave back and look forward to doing that when I'm back in England.
Awesome, everybody. That is Rob Staton. Check him out at Seahawks Draft Blog. Curtis Allen also contributing content over there. Lots of great stuff. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, follow him on YouTube, all that other good stuff. Thanks, everybody. I'm Brian Nemhaus. You can find me at Hawkblogger on Twitter and Instagram. This has been a bonus pod of Hawkblogger Mornings. Take care, all. I think we're out.